One, training is located in Clause 7 of 9001. So we're looking at people, infrastructure. So that for us really is training and calibration are our two big ones there. And then control of documents. So we're looking at document retention. How do we keep work instructions, SOPs, all those things with rev control, making sure when we do an update, everybody hears about it, and then promoting that awareness throughout the facility. The most common audit findings for us here are inadequate training, effectiveness evaluation. So that's, okay, great, we trained somebody, but are we sure that was an effective training? And so how the heck do we do that? AI is really good at writing tests for you, and so certainly when I teach, I often use it to help me construct a test that, hey, here's what I taught this week, use it, right? To put in your work instruction, put in your procedures, and say, hey, let's test people on it. Let it build that out, and then take it to a Google form. Unfortunately, Google won't let you just like auto make a Google form test. That would be awesome if it did that. They won't let you do that yet. But I use those. I take them to a Google form. We teach an internal auditor course, and at the end of it, we just created a test using everything we just trained people on, and we have all the questions and answers, and we're ready to go. So we can really speed that up and get people kind of that set of training. I think it's really interesting. I just built one this morning, a personalized training plan for a new inspector at a fab shop. So they're bringing in an inspector. We know what kind of equipment they have. We know their quality management system, so we know where he should get trained, where he's going to focus. And so we built a 90-day training plan to cover this new employee. So the really interesting part about that is we started saying, okay, but we want him inspecting really quickly, so we're going to train him on that specific equipment. And I like to turn on the search feature and say, some of these we can do in-house, some of them we can't. Right? You might not have a GD&T expert in-house that can train on how to read a print. So we might say, hey, if we don't have the expertise in-house, find him a class, a local class that he can go take that's inexpensive, right? And make sure it's an online class, because I don't want him to have to go somewhere to take it, or if he wants in person, right? So letting it build out that training plan for people is a great game plan. Document control, so automating that review and update. I like the idea. We use this during audits now, where I can grab somebody's document set and say, does all this match what they say it is, right? Do all the revs match what they say it's supposed to match? And my team doesn't have to go through and look at every document and every revision. We can just do a mass check. So those things are much faster. Calibration management has been very interesting. I recently had a customer get their calibration certs from their supplier, and it was 258 pages long. So they gave them one PDF with every calibration cert on it. And they need to take that and put it into a log, which is a huge pain in the butt, right? Now I got to go through this whole sheet, right? And so what we did was we built them an AI tool that went through all 258 pages, created their log from it with the due dates and everything like that, so they can get their alerts. But I also had it alert me to any gauges that, one, failed, because we have to do what? We have to do a review of if that failure had an impact on our business, right? But two, I had it review for gauges that were heading towards failure. Look for gauges that might be on the edge of their tolerance zone that we should address right now. So letting it do that analysis on 258-page PDF, that is a place for Gemini, by the way. That's a place where Gemini works way better, because that has a bigger context window. So it was able to take more data in. I think ChatGPT's new context window is like 500,000 units, and Gemini's is 1 million. And so by doing that, I can feed it a ton more data, and it can understand and pull that info out. So this customer is able to look through and say, oh boy. And what we found, and I said, now look at all this data as a quality expert and look for trends in it and things that we should address. What we found with these guys is all their thread plugs were all heading towards failure. Right, so maybe they need to be buying a higher quality, thread plug. Maybe we need to get different hardening on them because we're using them so much. Maybe our people are using them to push burrs. Probably what's happening, and so they're messing up our thread plugs, right? So we can start to kind of address that some of those things are happening. And then lastly, it's sort of that evaluate the environmental impact. And so We have done this for calibration labs where we utilize their environmental monitoring, right? Calibration labs have to have temperature and humidity control within their labs, so we can understand that their measurements, are all within a range, right? Within that temperature range. And when we do that, we are able to correlate their time when they were in range and what they measured, right? So I can start to kind of dive in on were we accurate or were we not. So we've done this for calibration labs to analyze their data for a year to say, hey, you had some out of tolerance conditions in your lab. Did you measure anything during those times? If you did, is it critical? Do we need to go back and address them? So looking at these big data sets and sort of diving in at the, as those alerts happen is really sort of the advantage of using AI in that point. So I'd like you now to use our tool here and work on writing a prompt to create a refresher training for your team. So think about a piece of inspection equipment that you have within your company and say, hey, here's the equipment I have. Be very specific if you know that piece of equipment, right? So here's the equipment I have. Let's build a refresher training. Let's build a brief training course so I can get my team up to speed on this one particular piece of equipment. Use the search feature in chat so you can really kind of push it there to find new information if it exists, especially if it's a newer piece of equipment. Let it help build that training plan for you. Don't feel like you have to build all this stuff. This is the thing that engineers are slow at, is taking that full data set, right? If you have the manual for this thing, I would load the manual right into my tool and say, hey, what does my guy really need to know from this? How do I get him up and running on it? So use those, and let's quickly build a training plan for one of our employees. And think about putting some time constraints on that, because I don't want your employees to work on training plans for months, right? I want them to be up to speed in a couple weeks. At the end of that, I always say, is there a test or something that we need to have? So we ask it to, hey, create a test or create some type of evaluation system at the end. So that way, on this plan, we've got a way to say, yep, they're qualified to do this tool. Anybody got a training plan developed? I would think this would be a great place to use Claude just because of its ability to write. If you have a format that you would want it to write it in, I would say, hey, here's our template. This is how I like to write my documents in, right? So if you have a template format, one of the things in our system here, if you'll notice, it does not create images and it does not create documents. I get that question a lot. Like, why not? And can we make it? And I prefer it not to do that. I don't know how much experience anybody's had with, say, ChatGPT making them a Word document and then trying to actually use that document and maybe reformat it or something like that. It kind of explodes. And so I find that it is way more time consuming to deal with it on that end than it would be to just grab the data, grab the text that it generated and paste it into the template that I want it to be. That also forces that review to happen, which I want my people to do, rather than saying, oh, here's your Word document, send it. Right? I want them to have to grab it, paste it in, and actually make sure they read it. All right, got any training plans made? Any piece of equipment that you guys specifically would use here? That would be an interesting one to dive into. I don't know, do you guys have a CMM or anything?
A Faro arm.
Yeah, Faro. Okay, I mean, that's probably what I would send it to, right? Yeah. All right, so I'm sure it would absolutely make a really good training plan for that Faro, and understanding the one we made this morning is they're bringing somebody off the street who's never measured before, so understand, where do they need to start, right? That person probably needs to start with hand tools, print reading, right? And realistically should probably spend some time on the floor to understand what the heck we're making. All right, rolling into clause 8. So clause 8 of 9001. This is sort of the meat of 9001. This is plan and implement that design, that control of your processes, right? Determine the requirements of the products and services. If you have design, you guys are probably design. You exclude design, I would assume, but some folks have to do design. That's the most likely one to be excluded. That is a great place for risk analysis. Control of those externally provided processes and services. We're really looking at purchasing there. So I'm looking at, number one, do we have a way to approve vendors? Can we buy from only approved vendors? How do we check things when they come in? ISO is not particularly prescriptive on how you do that incoming inspection. So most of the time we say it's count, kind, and damage unless somebody says otherwise. And then so how are we doing that receiving inspection and documenting that it's done? And then control of production. So now we're going to dive into, are you using, what's following these parts or what's following your service, validating that here's what's supposed to be done and that those things have been done to this part. So, and then finally it hits release of those products. So how are we inspecting them at the end? All right, this is the meat section of 9001. How are we inspecting them at the end? What's the process? What's the game plan for that? And finally, if we have a problem, what do we do with it? We have non-conforming product. How do we address it? Do you guys log non-conformances a particular way? So system that you're using today, what are you using? What's that?
It's called Unipoint.
Unipoint, okay. And do you hit everything? So when we say non-conformances, I try to say, please make sure you're getting customer ones, internal ones, and vendor ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We see most people forget, they don't do a good job with internals, right? They make the ones that the customer are sending back, they're logging. Yeah. So great, we know what quality was missing, okay? But if you don't capture your internal ones, then we don't have a good picture of all the things that we're doing wrong. And internal nonconformance to me is, hey, on the CNC machine, we got 5 bad parts. And it's okay. I just want to know that they happened and that we can start tracking that and get to the why, right? So those are the things that I see, especially smaller fab shops, guys are get it done guys, right? Who just like want to fix stuff and get moving and to the next part. And while I appreciate that, we also, if we don't log those, we don't understand the full picture of what the nonconformances and rework and stuff is costing us. So here we're looking for things like supplier compliance, right? How are we making sure? And when I'm talking suppliers, that's not only of parts, that's also of outside services. So what are they giving you on the back end to say that they delivered what they said they delivered, that's a material cert, or they did what they said they were going to do. So I do like to dive in and give you a quick demo, and you actually should be able to do this. All right, so in your folder, you're going to see a material cert, okay? And if you go to the workshop, now we can start to use actual tools. And the idea here is I build tools for people that are repeatable. And so I will look at my material cert. All right, so what I want to do is I can look at, here's my prompt. I have a material cert I'm going to put in. So I'm going to ask for material cert. I'm going to ask for maybe what standard we're comparing it to or the purchase order and say, compare them and tell me if it matches or not, right? So you're able to do this. You should be able to see this workflow. It's called material cert review under the workshop. You should be able to see that. And all you have to do is take that material cert review, take that material cert, right? Take your sample purchase order, drop them in, and say compare. So what I'm looking for here is, number one, does it match in, right? And so it's looking at, here's what the material cert said, and here's the requirement. On my purchase order, I reference it was ASTM, and does it match? And please note, material certs tend to be some of the ugliest documents, so that's where you get pretty impressed with the object recognition on this. So if you look, this is a particularly bad one. We can see the tensile properties here. We can see here the chemical properties of this material, right? As I run that though, you'll note it doesn't match the requirements. The funny thing is this is the first one I ever tested and it didn't match. How often is that happening for companies and they don't even know it? Because they're not going to this level, right? You're able to run it through, and you don't, like, as a fabs, as a job shop, is this a problem or not? I mean, that's not for you to decide. That's for your customer to decide. And so you need to be able to catch this before you've made a bunch of parts with it, and now all of a sudden you're like, I don't know if that's a problem or not. So you should be able to run those. The idea here is now I can generate that workflow, right, and push it to my team. My team doesn't have to make this anymore. They don't have to know what the prompt is. All they got to do is drop those two things in and get a result. So this kind of stuff really becomes powerful as you start to be able to build those workflows for your team. And those are the things that we're looking for. We're not expecting everybody in the company to become an AI expert, right? But we want them to see opportunities, like, boy, it would really help if AI helped me here. And then as the expert in the company, being able to build a tool like that for them to jump in and be able to sort of make that difference. We see it for contract review and predictive maintenance. The contract review side has been sort of game changer for us, where we can, what I really like to get for my team is ask it to review the contract, but tell me what my flow downs are. What do I need to flow down to my vendors, right? Tell me what my deliverables are at the end of this. Because if that contract is 300 pages long, there might be deliverables, out throughout it that we have to have at the end. So make me a list of that so I know what I need to have at the end. Make me those checklists. Who should be doing that in your company? In my world, that should be the estimators doing that. Up front, I want that done before we even accept the job. That's a huge concern, right? Right now, I see two types of estimators. Either the guy that actually does that by hand right now, and he does 2 estimates a day, maybe. Or the guy that's just cranking out quotes all day. He never looks at this stuff. He gets it in and says, hey, quality, here's your problem, right? You guys have to deal with it now. I got the job, right? And so he hasn't actually understood what the full, the full implications of accepting that job are. So we need to catch that up front. And AI is excellent at being able to kind of dive into that. If you're able to use it there, your team's going to really get strong. And then that non-conformance management, using it to kind of track those issues, look for patterns. So using it on big data sets to help deal with that. So what I'd like to do is dive in. Sorry, that should say to support contract review, compare it to your internal process and generate. So we've got in your folder here. We've got some contracts. So I've got the purchase order from the company, a supplier quality manual, terms and conditions. What I'd like you to do is use that and use your, use your quality system right here. I gave you a quality manual. Use that quality system and say, how do we do? Like, do we meet this? Let me make sure you have all that. Yeah, there's contract review samples. So use those contract review samples and use your quality manual and say, what are our deliverables? Can we meet this contract with our quality system? So you can take that right to the chat. So I would go to that chat and then I would start to layer them in. I would say, here's my quality handbook. And here's the contracts. Purchase order from the customer. Here's their supplier quality manual, all the requirements. And here's their terms and conditions. Cool, now my system has that. And now we're going to ask it to compare them. So we're going to say, what are we looking for?